October 7th. All Plan Commission members are present except for Mr. Davin, who is absent today. We can move right into item number 1, which is approval of reports from October 3rd Plan Commission meeting. What are your wishes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
A motion.
Second that.
And we have a second by Lee. Any discussions, corrections? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? That motion carries. On to item 2 is the Vanderwall and Associates Wisconsin Rapids Recovery and Redevelopment Plan update, including September, October progress reports and online public survey summary. Mr. Kearns.
Thank you. I think the update, the most important thing is the summarized survey responses. So out of the total respondents, 638 to be exact, a majority lived in Wisconsin. There were some general themes about, the focus on redevelopment that attracts quality, jobs, and so forth, and takes care of any environmental there. Were themes. Again, there's more details on the 2-page summary for those interested. In terms of next steps, again, they're still finalizing the preliminary draft. They'll then turn that over to staff for staff review. If we feel as though it's appropriate to take to Plan Commission, we'll do so. I think given the size and the scope, it's probably something that will probably go back to the consultant before coming to Plan Commission, because I'd like to bring a very finalized document to Plan Commission and to the public. But that is anticipated again in the next couple of months here. So we will keep you up to date with these reports on a monthly basis. And if you have any questions specifically related to the project, I'd be happy to address them now or privately. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Kyle, the comment was made at a point not too long ago that they were still seeking a connection with Billerud. Has that connection been made?
Yes, actually, the mayor and I made that connection probably about a month or two ago now, and I know Vanderwall actually also made that connection 2 weeks ago. So they have established that connection, and they've gotten some good information.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, no actions needed on that item. We can move on to item 3, which is Wood County CSM 22-001173 is a request for a certified survey map approval to combine 3 lots for the courthouse and jail parcel ID 3407751, 3407750, and 3407748, and dedicate right-of-way on Saratoga Street and Baker Street. Mr. Kearns.
Thank you. You may recall that as a condition of the Planned Development District overlay, we required the county to combine these 3 parcels. This is the CSM that's doing that. In addition to that combination, as the mayor indicated, there are 2 dedications, meaning the official street map identifies increased right-of-way width. One of those is on Baker Street. It's about 10 feet, and then it kind of shrinks as you go further west. And the other is on Saratoga Street, and that's about 3 feet along the eastern or the southernmost property on Saratoga. We recommend approval. We think, again, this is appropriate for the jail expansion project, and we also acknowledge that the dedications mirror the official street map, and again, recommend approval. I do want to note that a county representative is here to answer any questions you may have specifically in regards to the map. Thank you.
Any questions?
I have a
Discussion?
question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Kyle, these were already rezoned then for improvement, all 3 of these lots? So they won't be conflicting at all?
Correct. So they were zoned to Planned Development District, which allows deviations from the underlying zoning standards. So you're correct in that any potential deviations regarding like setbacks and things of that nature are acknowledged with this lot combination. But obviously now it's being combined without those improvements being made.
Okay, yeah, that was my only question, just to ensure that there wasn't any conflict with the three being zoned differently, but I do remember we rezoned them. So.
Yeah, they were rezoned initially to institutional, and then we did an overlay of planned development district over the top.
I'll make a motion to approve the requested CSM, including the right-of-way dedication.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the request. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? That motion carries. We are moving on to item 5. City of Wisconsin Rapids 22-001179, public hearing and action on a request from the City of Wisconsin Rapids to amend Chapter 11 zoning ordinance, specifically to allow residential accessory buildings within a manufactured home park, R8 district, and to establish dimensional requirements for structures under manufacturing home park supplemental standards.
I think you skipped item 4.
You know what? You should have stopped me sooner. I crossed out 4 ahead of time. Okay, back to item 4. City of Wisconsin Rapids 22-001187, public hearing and action on a request from the City of Wisconsin Rapids to amend Chapter 12, subdivision and platting of land of the revised municipal code, specifically related to other land division and adjustments other than subdivisions, to clarify and permit an administrative review process. Mr. Kearns.
And I have to apologize as well because I made a mistake. The memo pertinent to this item is actually at the end of the packet, and it should be before, obviously, item 5. So you'll have to reference page 20 and 21 for the information. Again, I apologize for that. With regards to the request, since I've been here and even prior, a lot of subdivisions, small subdivisions, new lots, outlots, have come to this body, both within the city and within our extraterritorial plat review, and most of them are rubber stamped. We perform an adequate review internally. We look at lot size, use, zoning, to make sure all the zoning standards for lots are being met, and I think it would simplify things if those smaller CSMs, 4 or less lots, would just go through the administrative review process through our office rather than come before this body. Again, since I've been here for about 2.5 years, I don't think any of them have been questioned. And to me, I think it improves upon the efficiency of our office if we can, again, approve these small lot splits and changes as they come forth rather than requiring applicants to wait a month or longer depending on when they submit their application. With that being said, the changes we recommend are outlined on page 21, which again primarily changes the language from Plan Commission to Zoning Administrator, and then identifies some additional language regarding the dedications that would still go to this body. So the CSM you just approved would still have to come before this body because of the street dedication. But again, anything else, 4 or less lots would just be an administrative staff review. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So how about we hold a public hearing and then come back, and then the commission can kind of have a deliberation and questions. So I guess I'll call 3 times. Does anybody wish to speak in favor of this request or this amendment? For a second time, does anybody wish to speak in favor of this amendment? And for a third and final time, does anybody wish to speak in favor of the amendment? And how about for the first time, does anybody wish to speak against it? For a second time, does anybody wish to speak against it? And for a third and final time, does anybody wish to speak against this amendment? With that, at 4:11, we can close the public hearing. Commission, what are your wishes, questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Kyle, One, as far as if an applicant needs to wait a month or longer, what are some of the ramifications that an applicant would actually face for that?
You know, we've seen on rare instances, at the end of the year and stuff, if somebody wants to split a lot and build a home, you know, they're fighting with the building season in many instances. A lot of times with commercial, it just prolongs the process. So, you know, there are new lots that have been created out on 8th Street that have to go through the process. And so from a lot sale standpoint, it can be somewhat detrimental if they have to wait before they can close on the property because of the lot split approval required. You know, but, you know, again, thinking about economic development and promoting development, it makes sense to me to simplify the process. I will say that many other communities within central Wisconsin and across the state also permit administrative review of small certified survey maps like this. So we're not doing anything out of the ordinary when comparing to other communities.
Thank you.
Any other questions or?
I do want to add, initially we thought about pursuing, separating. A lot of communities will identify a major subdivision and a minor subdivision. We obviously identify just other land divisions generally, and so we forgot to actually remove the minor subdivision language, so it's highlighted in blue. If you look at page 2021, 12.09, in parentheses after that section, I would recommend removing that which says including minor subdivisions. Again, because we are not considering this minor, we're leaving it as another mechanism generally.
Any questions? Seeing none, then I guess I'll make a motion to approve the amendment to Chapter 12 subdivision and platting of land.
I'll
Eh,
second that.
In addition with including or the removal of including the minor subdivision. Thank you.
Who was the second?
Thad was.
Thank you.
Any discussion, further discussion, questions? Seeing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? That motion carries. And item number 5, City of Wisconsin Rapids 22-001179. Public hearing and action on a request from the City of Wisconsin Rapids to amend Chapter 11 zoning ordinance specifically to allow residential accessory buildings within a manufactured home park, R8 district, to establish dimensional requirements for the structures under the manufactured home park supplemental standards. Mr. Kearns.
I'm going to turn this one over to Carrie. Carrie, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Blazer, members of the commission. So the impetus for this item was that our department was contacted by Teresa Ralkin. I hope I'm saying that correctly. She has a property management role with the Maples Manufactured Home Park, and she was trying to go through the proper channels with someone that wanted to put up an accessory building. And when looking through the code really has no provision to allow an accessory building in the R8 Manufactured Home Park District, which we really think was an oversight because this is very common practice in the Manufactured Home Park District, as most of the spaces have at least one accessory structure out of necessity to house outdoor equipment and household material storage. So we think it's reasonable to assume that mobile home park residents would want an individual structure to do that. And we also think it's reasonable to assume that they would desire carports for vehicle parking. Therefore, we are recommending an amendment to Appendix A to make accessory building residential a permitted use in the R8 district. We're also recommending amendments to Appendix B and Appendix C to establish dimensional requirements for the structures, as we do feel it's important to provide some guidance around how accessory structures are done and how many are permitted. So the first thing is that change to Appendix A to make the accessory building residential a permitted use in the R8 district, which, as I said, now it's not, it's prohibited. And then under Appendix B, which outlines our supplemental standards, our definition, our parking requirements for the manufactured home park, we are recommending no more than 2 accessory structures be permitted per space, that the buildings not exceed 120 square feet. A 10 by 12 is a pretty standard size, and Teresa was helpful in sending her guidelines that they use for their manufactured home park, and that's their maximum, and it seemed like a good standard that makes sense within the manufactured home park space dimensions. We also are recommending allowance for a carport with 1 open side, so that it does not become a structure, an enclosed structure, not to exceed 16 feet by 24 feet, which would be a pretty generous 1-car stall, and then also not to exceed the 10-foot height requirement. Soft-sided structures and canopies are prohibited, which is in keeping with our existing residential accessory structure standards. And we're also not allowing them to be closer than 10 feet to another unit or 10 feet to an internal service road, which is pretty consistent with our existing requirements for the manufactured home itself. In addition, we're suggesting a change to Appendix C to specify that no more than 2 detached accessory buildings be permitted per space. And I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you. Let's, at 4:18, call the public hearing to order. Let's take anybody that wishes to speak against this request for the first time. Does anybody wish to speak against the request for a second time? And lastly, for a third time, does anybody wish to speak against the amendment to Chapter 11? Does anybody wish to speak in favor of the request? For a second time, does anybody wish to speak in favor? And go ahead. Tom?
Just a question, Mayor, and I wish, I wish I would have asked it sooner, so it's not
Nope, you're
in
fine.
favor or against, if I may.
Go ahead. Yep.
In the, you talking about carports, and the question I have is, those aren't allowed in a residential area, are they?
They are.
Yeah.
They're permitted as an accessory structure.
Okay, I wanted to clarify that, because my memory was that they weren't, so, okay, I wanted to ask that. Okay,
They have to have hard surface walls and roof. They can't be soft-sided structures.
okay,
So tin roof or, other type of siding.
as long as it's, whatever, that it is there, thank you.
Thank you. And for a third time, does anybody wish to speak in favor of the request? Okay, we can close the public hearing at 4:19. Any questions or comments? I guess myself, I'm in favor of this. I was actually quite surprised when Kyle told me about this item and that these were not addressed in the zoning code, because to me, it would make sense that, a carport or even, just even an accessory structure to put your lawnmower in there was not allowed. So I completely support this. Any other?
I have a question regarding it. Maybe this came up, Carrie could describe how this got kind of provocated, or maybe the petitioner. When we're talking about accessory structures other than carports, are we somewhat referring to concrete slab and an actual structure being built, or is it more prevalent to see, a small shed purchased and kind of put together for some of these tools? And
I think typically it would be kind of a small pre-made shed that would just need to be anchored per the building inspector. But Teresa, I don't know if you want to explain what you're typically seeing when you have people that are requesting, yep.
maybe just so we get some context, like behind, I think you know, I'm with the mayor as well in that I'm surprised that this wasn't already, but how did this provocate and what do you typically see residents put on there?
Well, we have a criteria. It has to be a kit built. It either has to have the T111 siding or vinyl siding on the outside of the wood shed. Or they can buy a plastic shed. They can't have any metal sheds. So throughout the Maples, I would say 95% of them already have concrete pads ready for a storage unit. There are some in the older section that do not. So we made a criteria that everybody has to have their storage unit on the left side of the house towards the back. So it's not a front structure where you could drive down the road and actually see a storage unit right up next to the front of the house. They're all in the same spot throughout the community. In the newer section off of Ruby, those have bigger slabs to fit a bigger unit like we were asking in our criteria. And those already have concrete pads. So nobody would have to build a concrete pad throughout the community. There's space for it.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of a context to understand, you know, what's going to be built. And then, I guess this is maybe a question for Carrie in this arena, but given that there are other mobile home or mobile home manufactured home facilities within our community other than the Maples, are they too going to be held to some of the same standards then that it appears the Maple company is also holding their constituency?
So the parks would all be subject to these standards that are outlined in these appendix or appendices. If a park wanted to have more restrictive standards and have their own, they could certainly do that. But at a minimum, they would need to abide by what's in our appendix A, B, and C.
Which were somewhat adopted based on your conversations then with,
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, and in looking at other communities. I mean, I did look at other communities too, just to kind of see what they did, and this seemed pretty consistent. I mean, not overly restrictive, but not, you know, overly permissive.
thanks. I think it's just a concern that I had, given the variations of aesthetics in various mobile homes that we have in our community.
Mr. Austin.
Related to the carports, obviously you have on here that one side must remain open. Can you explain the necessity to that? I know, you know, come wintertime, it'd be nice to maybe have a fully enclosed, maybe not necessarily paved or whatever the case may be. It's a temporary structure, or not temporary, but lightly built structure. But why the need to have one side open?
So when Kyle and I discussed this, I guess our main concern, the reason we included that was that if it becomes, so the 10 by 12 is the maximum size for the accessory building to house stuff, you know, like household equipment or whatever. Because the carport dimensions are bigger, because we're thinking that would be to cover a vehicle and protect a vehicle, if it becomes completely enclosed, it could easily become then another accessory building to hold items, I guess, which seems out of proportion with the size of the manufactured home, was our thought.
Well, realistically, the 10 by 12, if you will, you're not going to fit a vehicle in that. And I understand that the variance, I mean, could it be delineated as far as if it is to be used as a carport type of scenario, just to maybe allow it to be enclosed?
So you're saying you think it's reasonable if they had a door, I mean, if they wanted to have like a garage door
Correct.
to be kind of I mean, I think that's reasonable. I mean, I think we could have, you know, language, except that carports not to exceed 16 by 24, remove the open on one side and just, you know, carports for the use of vehicle storage only or something like
yep,
that.
yep.
Mhm.
Was that a motion?
Sure. I'll make that motion, including the language that was just discussed as far as the enclosure of the carports.
I guess my question to that motion would be, does the petitioner have any relevance or anything to speak on that? Yeah, I mean, just to add your perspective to the conversation, so we get a better understanding of why, the majority of these are unenclosed.
There's a majority of them that are enclosed, completely enclosed. And when they do have a carport, the carport would actually be in front of the shed, and they would have to stick with the guidelines that we had before we didn't know we couldn't have carports, which is what the building inspector said, it had to be at least, the poles had to stay on the concrete that was there, inside the concrete. They could enclose them, but our recommendation, if somebody wanted to do that, it has to be with siding. It has to be, they'd have to enclose it with vinyl siding. It would have to match the house. It can't go over to the sidewalk. The older section, there's a lot of them in there that are already enclosed with vinyl or metal, which we are discouraging from happening in the future. But it does get pretty windy in Wisconsin, and the snow kind of builds up, and we do have a lot of elderly residents there that could use a carport that's enclosed where they could get out of the car and not having to be shoveling, a pad that's 60 feet long, 12 foot wide. And most of the carports that are there already are 12 foot wide. All of them don't go to the end of the manufactured home because some of them have a shed at the end. So they can walk, the front is normally open, but some of them do have garage doors on them or house doors.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I'll second the motion by Mr. Austin.
Is there any further discussion or questions regarding motion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go
I
ahead.
have a question, and it's more just a question in general, and that is, how do these dimensions and requirements for a pad comport with the standards that we apply to a regular residential lot?
So they're significantly reduced. So for example, a single-family residence can have a 900 square foot accessory structure. They could actually have two of them on a single-family residence. So that's a 30 by 30 structure. So here, they're significantly limited in that they can only have a 120 square foot, structure and/or a carport that's 16 by 24 feet.
I guess specifically what I'm wondering about is the requirement for a concrete pad under any of those structures.
So if you're parking a vehicle under it, it has to be hard surface, concrete, asphalt, brick pavers. If it's a shed, you don't necessarily have to have a hard surface under a shed. But again, they may require it as part of the park covenants. I think many of them do because they want to, especially Maples, they want to maintain an aesthetic appeal as well and some uniformity throughout the park. So our standards would just be the minimum. They can certainly enforce anything above and beyond our standards.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Come on up. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Anybody opposed? That motion carries. We are on item 6, which is adjournment. We have a motion by Thad,
Second.
second by Lee. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody.